The morning of October 5, 2025, began like any other in Willow Creek, Tennessee, a quiet town nestled in the misty folds of the Smoky Mountains, where the air carried the scent of pine and the promise of a crisp fall day. At 7:45 a.m., that tranquility shattered. A deafening explosion tore through an abandoned warehouse on the town's outskirts, a dilapidated structure locals had long assumed was just a forgotten relic of the area's industrial past. The blast, later estimated to be equivalent to 500 pounds of TNT, reduced the warehouse to a smoldering skeleton of twisted steel and concrete, its shockwave rattling homes, cracking windows 3 miles away, and sending a plume of black smoke billowing into the sky. Farmer Elias Grant, sipping coffee on his porch a mile away, froze as he saw a fireball erupt, bigger than a barn, red as hell itself, followed by a bone-deep rumble he swore was, like Judgment Day. Within minutes, sirens wailed as volunteer firefighters and sheriff's deputies raced to the scene, only to find chaos. Flaming debris scattered across a half-mile radius, the air thick with the acrid stench of gunpowder and molten metal, and the first whispers of dread rippling through the crowd. Initial reports confirmed 3 deaths. Brothers Harlan and Jedediah Crow, members of a shadowy militia called the Appalachian Liberty Front, and Maria Ruiz, a 28-year-old delivery driver whose van was caught in the inferno, her life snuffed out in a delivery gone tragically wrong. Sheriff Lena Hargrove, a no-nonsense veteran of Willow Creek's small police force, faced a growing throng of reporters by noon, her voice steady but grim. This wasn't an accident. We've got evidence of homemade explosives, volatile stuff, and we're treating this as a criminal act. By mid-afternoon, the FBI had descended, cordoning off a 5-mile radius with military precision, their black SUVs clogging the town's single-lane roads. Helicopters buzzed overhead, and forensic teams in white suits combed the wreckage, pulling fragments of circuit boards and chemical vials from the ash. In Willow Creek, a town of 2,000 where everyone knew each other's kin, fear took root. Families gathered in the community center, clutching styrofoam cups of coffee, trading rumors of strange lights at the warehouse in recent weeks. Clara Voss, a widow who lived nearby, cheerfully recounted seeing trucks coming and going at midnight, men in hoods who didn't wave back. As dusk fell, the glow of wildfires sparked by the blast lit the horizon, casting an eerie orange hue over the valley. Social media exploded with grainy videos of the fireball, some calling it terrorism, others speculating about government cover-ups. In Washington, senators issued calls for calm, but their words felt distant to a town grappling with its new reality. The explosion wasn't just a local tragedy, it had peeled back the skin of a quiet community, exposing something darker, something that hinted at a larger, more dangerous plot simmering beneath the surface. By nightfall, as National Guard troops patrolled the perimeter and FBI agents set up a command post in the high school gym, Willow Creek braced for answers, knowing they might come at a cost no one was ready to pay. The sun rose on October 6, painting the smoldering ruins in hues of gold and ash, but the clarity it brought only deepened the unease gripping Willow Creek. The warehouse, now a blackened crater, revealed its secrets under the scrutiny of federal investigators. Shattered glass vials containing traces of nitroglycerin precursors, half-assembled pipe bombs with crude wiring, and singed notebooks filled with scrawled manifestos railing against tyrannical elites. The Appalachian Liberty Front, a militia group few in town had heard of until now, emerged as the culprit. The Crow brothers, both in their 30s and former Army veterans, had been radicalized in the dark corners of the internet, their once quiet lives warped by encrypted forums peddling bomb-making tutorials and anti-government screeds. Sheriff Hargrove, briefing the press under a sagging oak outside the courthouse, held up a photo of the brothers, their faces stern and bearded. Harlan and Jedediah were locals, known for hunting and fixing trucks, but they fell into something ugly. Evidence suggested their target was a rumored federal land seizure in the Smoky Mountains, planned to coincide with a militia rally 2 weeks away, a symbolic stand against perceived overreach. But something, hubris, a miswired detonator, or perhaps a betrayal, had triggered the blast prematurely. Investigators found traces of ammonium nitrate and diesel fuel, a poor man's C4, stacked in rusted barrels, enough to level a city block. Clara Voss, the widow who'd seen suspicious activity, sat with an FBI sketch artist, describing boxes of fertilizer that smelled like death, unloaded under moonlight. The investigation widened. Cell phone records showed the Crows communicating with a network stretching from Kentucky to Georgia, linked by cryptocurrency payments and burner phones. In Willow Creek, the shock gave way to division. At the diner, locals argued over whether the brothers were patriots or lunatics, while others mourned Maria Ruiz, whose smiling photo now adorned makeshift memorials. Nationally, the explosion became a lightning rod. Cable news anchors dissected the rise of domestic extremism, citing a 2024 DHS report that warned of militia groups exploiting rural grievances. On X, hosts ranged from reasoned calls for unity to wild conspiracies. Some claimed the blast was a CIA false flag, others pointed to extraterrestrial sabotage, citing strange lights, reported weeks earlier. In Washington, lawmakers demanded hearings on explosives regulation, but their rhetoric felt hollow to Willow Creek's residents, who watched their town become a footnote in a larger culture war. The FBI's agent Marcus Hale, a grizzled domestic terrorism specialist, stood before a task force in the high school gym, pointing to drone footage of the warehouse's perimeter, rigged with tripwires and crude surveillance. "These weren't amateurs," he said, his voice low but firm. "They had plans, big ones." As firefighters battled lingering blazes in the surrounding woods, fueled by spilled chemicals, the town held its breath. A vigil for the victims drew hundreds, their candles flickering against the chill. But beneath the grief, questions gnawed. How had this festered in their backyard? And who else was out there, watching, waiting to strike? By night, as the FBI sifted through digital breadcrumbs on the dark web, Willow Creek's quiet hills seemed to hum with secrets, a town forever changed by the fire that had erupted from within. By October 7th, the investigation had become a race against time, with the warehouse site a hive of activity under a gray Tennessee sky. Firefighters, drenched in sweat, fought wildfires that refused to die, the flames feeding on chemical residues that left a noxious haze over Willow Creek. Forensic teams, cloaked in hazmat suits, crawled through the rubble, their gloved hands unearthing fragments of a nightmare: scorched circuit boards, detonator caps, and a charred laptop with encrypted files that hinted at a broader conspiracy. At noon, a breakthrough jolted the case forward. DNA traces on a shattered beaker matched Randall "Rusty" Kane, a fugitive survivalist wanted since a 2023 arms bust in Kentucky, where he'd slipped through an ATF dragnet. Kane, the elusive mastermind of the Appalachian Liberty Front, was no phantom. Cell tower pings placed him 20 miles from the blast site hours before the explosion, and his fingerprints coated a toolbox stuffed with C4 casings. Agent Marcus Hale, addressing a tense press conference, held up a grainy photo of Kane, his eyes cold and defiant. "He's the architect of this chaos, and we're closing in." The manhunt intensified, with choppers sweeping the Smoky Mountains and tips flooding in from as far as Montana, where Kane had reportedly trained with other militia cells. In Willow Creek, the human cost grew heavier. Maria Ruiz's husband, Javier, stood outside the wreckage of her delivery van, now a twisted relic in an impound lot, clutching their toddler as he whispered, "She was just doing her job." Her death fueled outrage, with townsfolk demanding answers at a packed town hall. Sheriff Hargrove, her badge glinting under fluorescent lights, admitted the scope was overwhelming. "We're a small department, but the feds are here now, and we're digging deep." Leaked ATF documents, posted anonymously on X, stirred the pot, suggesting an undercover informant may have been embedded with the front, only for the operation to backfire catastrophically. Civil liberties groups cried foul, accusing the government of entrapment, while militia sympathizers on encrypted apps hailed the Crows as martyrs. The investigation uncovered more. A ledger in the warehouse listed shipments of precursor chemicals from a shady online supplier, routed through shell companies in Panama. Clara Voss, the widow who'd tipped off deputies, became a reluctant hero, her descriptions of "men with rifles at midnight" leading to sketches plastered across every news channel. As the day wore on, a chilling tip came through the FBI hotline, a distorted voice claiming Kane was hiding in a moonshine still deep in Blackthorn Hollow, a maze of overgrown trails 15 miles east. SWAT teams mobilized, their boots crunching through the underbrush as dusk painted the sky blood red. In Willow Creek, fear mingled with resolve. Prayer circles formed outside the Baptist church, but so did arguments at the gas station, where locals debated whether Kane was a monster or a misunderstood patriot. Nationally, The story dominated headlines, with experts warning that the blast was a symptom of a fractured nation, where rural despair and online echo chambers birthed deadly ideologies. As night fell, the hum of drones over the hollow signaled a reckoning was near, but the question lingered: would capturing Cain douse the fire, or merely fan its flames? On October 8th, as a moonless night cloaked the Smoky Mountains, the hunt for Rusty Cain reached its climax in Blackthorn Hollow, a tangle of kudzu and forgotten shacks where whispers of old moonshine runs still lingered. The FBI, guided by a tipster's distorted call, had zeroed in on a derelict still 15 miles from Willow Creek, where thermal drones detected heat signatures flickering in the dark. Agent Marcus Hale, leading a 50-strong task force, orchestrated a pre-dawn raid with surgical precision, knowing Cain's reputation as a survivalist with a hair-trigger temper. At 2:17 a.m., the silence shattered, flashbangs exploded like miniature suns, illuminating the hollow as agents bellowed, "Federal agents, hands up." Cain, holed up in a fortified shack, answered with 3 sharp cracks from an Arkansas 15, the rounds pinging off armored vehicles. Return fire was swift, measured, pinning him down until dawn, when a haggard Cain emerged from a root cellar, wrists cuffed, his face a snarl of defiance. "The government's the real bomb," he spat as cameras rolled, his words instantly viral on X. The raid yielded a trove: blueprints for car bombs targeting courthouses in Nashville and Knoxville, recruitment lists naming 200 militia members across 6 states, and bank records tracing crypto payments to a Russian dark web broker. Cain's arrest triggered a cascade. Raids in Kentucky, Georgia, and Ohio netted 12 more suspects, including a Tennessee state trooper whose militia tattoos raised alarms about infiltration. In Willow Creek, the news brought a fragile relief, but grief for Maria Ruiz burned raw. Her widower, Javier, faced reporters outside the church, his voice breaking: "Justice for my Maria means locking them all up, forever." The town, still reeling, grappled with its new infamy. The diner buzzed with debates over whether Cain's capture ended the threat or merely exposed its depth. Seized documents painted a chilling picture. The Appalachian Liberty Front had planned a second secession, with the warehouse blast meant as a test run for a wave of attacks. Leaked emails suggested Cain had trained with ex-military contractors, learning to weaponize fertilizer and drone tech. Nationally, the raid fueled a firestorm. Pundits on cable news called for crackdowns on militia groups, while libertarian voices decried government overreach, pointing to the botched ATF sting that may have sparked the explosion. On X, posts oscillated between hailing Cain as a folk hero and demanding his execution. In Washington, lawmakers pushed bills to regulate ammonium nitrate sales, but rural communities bristled, fearing farmers would bear the cost. Back in the hollow, agents sifted through Cain's arsenal: 30 rifles, 5,000 rounds of ammo, and a laptop with encrypted plans for drone strikes. Sheriff Hargrove, addressing a weary town, admitted, "We got him, but this ain't over." As Cain was airlifted to a federal facility, his smug grin on live TV chilled viewers, a reminder that his ideology had roots far beyond one man. In Willow Creek, the Baptist church hosted a prayer service, but outside, pickups flew flags echoing Cain's rhetoric, a stark sign of a town and nation split by the same fault lines that had ignited the blast. 2 weeks after the October 5th explosion, Willow Creek stood transformed, its quiet streets now a stage for a national drama that refused to fade. The warehouse site, a charred crater cordoned by yellow tape, awaited demolition, but its scars lingered in the town's psyche, mirrored by the russet leaves falling across the Smoky Mountains. Federal prosecutors, armed with 1.2 terabytes of data from Cain's devices, laid out a case that stunned even seasoned investigators. The Appalachian Liberty Front had plotted a coordinated bombing campaign, targeting federal buildings from Nashville to Knoxville, aiming to spark a second secession, to reclaim America. The warehouse blast, a misfire of their own volatile concoction, had derailed their plans, but the intent was clear: hundreds could have died. Rusty Cain's arraignment in a Knoxville courthouse drew a circus. Militia sympathizers waving, "Don't tread on me," flags clashed with counter-protesters chanting, "No more blood," their signs bobbing under a cold drizzle. Inside, Cain, shackled but unbowed, pleaded not guilty, his lawyer claiming entrapment by an ATF informant. Agent Marcus Hale, testifying before a closed grand jury, countered with evidence. Kane's fingerprints on detonators, his voice on intercepted calls planning, a fire to wake the nation. In Willow Creek, healing was a jagged process. A community fund raised $200,000 for Maria Ruiz's family, whose memorial oak, planted by her toddler's tiny hands, took root outside the library. Murals of resilience, eagles soaring over mountains, sprang up on barn walls, a defiant art against the town's wounds. But division simmered. At the diner, old friends argued over Kane's motives, some whispering he'd been pushed too far by federal policies. Nationally, the blast reshaped policy. Congress rushed to bill mandating AI surveillance of dark web forums, passing with rare bipartisan support, while tech giants like X pledged to flag extremist content, though skeptics doubted their resolve. Experts on CNN warned of a digital tinderbox, citing 2024 data showing a 300% spike in militia recruitment online. In Willow Creek, Sheriff Hargrove faced a packed town hall, her voice hoarse but resolute. "We've been blown apart, but we'll rebuild stronger. Watch us rise." Her words rallied some, but others, like farmer Elias Grant, felt the weight of betrayal, knowing neighbors had harbored the front's secrets. The FBI's sweep continued, uncovering militia caches in 4 states, and X buzzed with leaks, some true, like Kane's ties to foreign agitators, others wild, like claims of a Pentagon cover-up. Javier Ruiz, speaking at a vigil, held his daughter tight, demanding, "No more Marias." As winter loomed, Willow Creek turned inward, its people knitting together through potlucks and prayer, yet wary of strangers driving through. The crater, soon to be filled, stood as a reminder of fragility, but also of grit. Nationally, the explosion forced a reckoning about ideology, access to explosives, and the internet's role in fanning hate. In the valley, where the blast had echoed loudest, residents looked to the future, determined to rise from the ashes, even as they scanned the hills for the next spark, knowing the embers of extremism still glowed in the dark.